Good evening. Testing, testing. Hello, hello, Peter. Always, sometimes. Like that name. CT326. Welcome to the Sunday Night Market Scan. Market review, whatever we're calling it. Hi, everybody. How was everyone's weekend? Did you? Don't you tell me that. Feel like I should play a little music. Hello, hello, Kamalash. Rudy, the CEO. Guida, Jux. Christian Jimenez. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, what do you guys think, guys, gals, non-binary pals? Bullish or bearish? We go big up or big down? Bullish. Okay. Did we gap up? I don't know if we gapped up. Let's double check the futures here. We did a small gap up and then we filled it. And now we're just moving sideways under Friday's low. Here's where we closed. Slightly above close, but just chopping here. Right at Friday's and Friday's chop low chop area. Welcome everyone. Sunday night market review. This is where we look at the indexes and some big tickers in the market to see what we can see, ascertain some sort of direction for the week. I mean, technically there was a link 3 minutes ago, but that's fine. It doesn't matter. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I will say, just for the sake of saying it every time, not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Trading is risky. Risky. All right. As that's being said, I will map out trades that I would be looking at. It is up to you to decide if that is something you want to do. Everything within risk. Okay. Cheers, Scotty. All right. So checking out SPY, I was actually looking for a short trade with a break to the downside of this channel. Did not get it. Did not get it at all. Didn't even hit the entry on that trade, which was fine. Hello, lights out, bud. Instead, we broke to the upside, took out the highs, and pushed to new highs. I would assume that we are going to head back to the upside of this channel. I think probably, probably another all-time high this week. We'll see. There doesn't seem to be any reason to think otherwise. What do we have for news this week? We have GDP numbers on Thursday. And then Powell is speaking on Good Friday, but I think the markets are closed. We also have PCE on Friday. Nope, I think we're just gonna keep going here. So we hit a new high over that price target right here that we had been watching on this red candle. And then we got the consolidation week. And now we're breaking to the upside. So I assume we're going to keep going. That's what I feel. And that's a SPY. Qs. Qs, on the other hand, are moving just sideways. They did, hit a new high, but they didn't quite do a SPY there. SPY is just going straight up. Qs tend to be looking to be a little bit more hesitant. So instead of hitting a new high, they're actually ranged right here. So on tech, I would be more looking for a break of this range. Let's see what that looks like on the daily. See how we took out all these highs and now we pulled right back into this range. So I think on tech, we might get a little bit more of a pullback, which would probably look more like sideways on SPY. Look how much of a higher hit SPY did coming out of Wednesday than tech did. Wednesday wasn't the breakout day for tech. Thursday was. That's Thursday was when we hit the high and then pulled back on SPY. Diamonds, I assume the diamonds are going to continue. They've hit the entry on this trade. I assume they're going to that price target right around 408, 409, somewhere in there. So I am long on the boomer stocks. IWM getting slapped right back down again. Having a rough time in here. Hit that half mark, pulled back. This would be a good place to long for a move up to 212, in my opinion. So we could see a bounce right here as we fill in this inefficiency on the IWM daily. This inefficiency right here. That's what I would be looking for. I'd look now that we filled that, I'd look for some maybe a dip below these highs right here that we broke. And off we go. So probably look something like this. This is what I would assume next week would look like for something like that. Something like that with a wick below that 204, 205 level. So really nice spot here. I like this gap. This gap got us a push over this previous high, market structure shift, pull back. I'd like IWM for another move up. Apple, I think will continue. I was looking for that long, got the long, and then the immediate rejection off of this gap right here. Apple, I feel, just wants to continue down. We broke to the downs. It broke to the downside of this wedge, retested it, tested this gap. I think it wants to continue down. Let's see what the weekly looks like here. And we bounced at that order block 2-3 times a charm. I mean, maybe. I feel like for Apple, it would be nice to get an inside week right here. Reason being, so we had the big move down right here, the consolidation, and then last week took out both the highs and lows of the previous week, and the week previous to that took out the highs of that. So this feels like it's grabbing liquidity up here, and down here for a move. So now that we got the consolidation and then the engulfing, we're going to see if we break this order block on the weekly. Feeling bearish right now. I'm feeling bearish. Probably, let's see where would the next area be for this. You know, we might be setting up a big old harmonic. It's probably something like that. Especially if it breaks this order block. And the reason I picked this area that wasn't just an arbitrary area, we've got an inefficiency gap down there. And we've got some more down here, but this will be the at exhaustion gap. So those areas I would look for along. So feeling a pullback on Apple, which is probably why the Qs just are moving silently sideways. NVIDIA, I mean, the price action on the weekly didn't break to the downside, took the upside. There's no reason to think that it's not going to continue up there. I think it's going to continue up to at least 973 and take out this high. If we get a close above it, I think it's going to 1,000 again. But looking pretty bullish on NVIDIA. Got the nice pullback into those gaps, pushing up now. AMD, on the other hand, is not having as good of a time as NVIDIA. Now we're getting a break apart. So before we had whatever NVIDIA would do, AMD would do, and now we're getting a disconnect. NVIDIA keeps going up. AMD is pulling back harder. There was just news that them and Intel got the ban in China on government computers. I don't know if that's going to be too big of a deal. I think it's mostly just a headline. We might see a gap down, but this feels very much to me like is pulling back. And I don't know if it's pulling back ahead of an NVIDIA pullback or if it's pulling back in lieu of it, and it's going to reload and take off with NVIDIA. So right now, NVIDIA is the one that's controlling basically all the tech market. As NVIDIA goes up, everything else either comes up or goes down. So if AMD is making this pullback while NVIDIA is showing bullishness, I would be probably long AMD. It does have, let's take a look at a larger time frame here. It does have this volume imbalance, which is where we bounced. So we've already tested this previous all-time high after breaking it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row before pushing up. So now we're pulling back, filled this inefficiency. I think we might try and pull up. So on the daily, if we gap down on AMD, I would look to get some calls. I think that would be a good place to get some calls and try and ride it up to these previous highs on a day trade. That would be what I would look at. Breakout and retest. I mean, it's already gotten the breakout on the larger scale. We're actually below these highs, which is a little bit sus, but we're chopping around in this area, which would be a large volume imbalance area on the higher time frame. So I think we came down here to reload on some orders before we go back up. That's why I would take a long in this area with a short stop. I mean, I don't want to get consumed on that. You know? Amazon consolidating nicely up here, still in this range. Tried to break out 2 days ago on Thursday. Didn't quite get it. Pulled right back. And here's a setup that I really like. So we've put in this range right here, being from the top of this candle to the bottom of this candle here. We've got this range. Price is bouncing back and forth. We got these big gaps in here and these gaps in here. And as we're chopping back and forth, it's filling all those orders, taking all those out. And now we get the move up with a gap. I tried to break out and a pullback. So we got the breakout a little bit. We didn't get the close above this previous high, but we did get the wick up. So this is a trade that I like to watch here. So we could be getting a breakaway gap right here on the daily. And we got the pullback into it. So I wouldn't mind taking a long and shooting up for at least this previous high right here. And put my stop probably right below Friday's low. Actually, does have this in volume imbalance down here. So maybe that's where I put my stop. But I think this is gearing up to make a larger move. Just about AMD calls. Hopefully, with the news, it doesn't dump. I think we might get a little gap down, but honestly, I don't think the news is big enough to warrant a large move down. I just don't think that news is that strong. There might be a little overreaction. So if we gap down, I would expect the dip to get bought. And then I'd like to see some movement over this previous high. So we've got this previous high right here that we tried to break out. I want to see a big move over that. See where we got this big trend bar right here? We got this big move creating this gap between the high of this candle and the low of this candle. That's a very bearish candle, but we got this gap between these wicks. I want to see that coming out of here, and I want to see it push above this high and even above this high. I want a big move on Amazon up into 182. This would be a daily chart. So I'd like to see it tomorrow, honestly. Let's check out the weekly. Similar situation. The thing I like about the weekly here is that it got the breakout of the broadening formation, the pullback into it. And then last week we took out the highs of the previous 2 weeks. So I would like to see that mean something. I'd like to see it move up. We didn't take out the lows, but now we got the price reversal to the upside. So I'm watching that. I'd like to see that move up higher on Amazon. Meta really hasn't had any quit. I would assume that this thing is just going to keep trucking. There's no reason, in my opinion, to assume otherwise. Let's take this range right here. Project that out. So that's where we were ranged. And then we broke out to the upside, tested it a few times, and now we're breaking back to the upside here. As far as targets are concerned on Meta right now, it's hard to say. Isn't necessarily something I would chase long. Maybe if it can get a break over this previous high and get a close over that, I would try to maybe take a long. But you're in a premium area right now. You long when you're at a discount and you short when you're at a premium. But I would like to see maybe a little bit more of a pullback into 500 before reloading and heading up to a new high. So the trade on Meta, I would really like to have an entry around 500 for a trade probably up to 550. That would be an ideal trade for me. Okay. In this case, how many weeks of expiration would I recommend to be a nice risk to reward? Well, the risk reward on this is going to be, I set the stop to the top of this range. Could short up here just below this volume imbalance. That's an 8.3 risk reward. And this is a daily chart. So I'd be looking at probably weekly contracts, and I wouldn't be swinging them, honestly. So if that's within your risk for putting up for a trade, then maybe that's something you want to look into. But I wouldn't be trading any more than 1%, maybe 3% on a trade like this. So it depends on the size of your portfolio on which contracts you would take. You could go for a lower cost trade and maybe try the 540s for a push up over this high and see if you could get some movement on that. Or you could go a week out and take something closer to the money, which would then get you that intrinsic value once it goes in the money if it breaks out to the upside. Microsoft, you're welcome. Microsoft, I was looking for that short, did not get it, got stopped out, and now it's up here filling this gap. This thing, I mean, look at that. That's a pretty clear breakout of a range right there. Range, breakout. So this is what I was looking at. What was it over on Amazon? See how we got the wick above the range and then the pullback? When we look at Microsoft, the wick above the range and then the pullback and then got the rip above in the close. I would assume Microsoft's going to continue up this week. I mean, it's had new all-time highs every day. I really would have liked to close closer to like 435 and given us a nice gap, but didn't get it. So probably will just truck along. Not really something that I would trade right now. Maybe just day trade some at the money calls, see how far it goes on the day. But this is going to give more context into how the market is going to run because Microsoft is very heavy in the NASDAQ and in the S&P 500. So if we're bullish on Microsoft, which I do believe is the most valuable company in the world right now, it's like a $3 trillion market cap. If we've got this thing moving, making some new highs, that's going to help carry the market too. So if this and Nvidia are both going to go, I mean, that would be a situation where maybe you don't want to trade the contracts on Microsoft. Maybe they're a bit too pricey. Maybe you don't want to trade the contracts on Nvidia. Maybe they're a bit too pricey because let's face it, they are. But this was something that you could day trade, 0 or 1 DTE on the Qs. You could take SQQs, SQQ puts. You could trade TQQQ longs. There's other things that you could trade. Assuming that Microsoft is, now that it's got the breakout, that it might see a big push up, especially with something like Nvidia behind it and Amazon, if that one's going to go this week too. That's a lot of momentum to keep going up, right? So similar situation to what happened here. Got the range, the breakout, the push up, the range, the breakout, then I'm assuming the push up. So Netflix is approaching that gap. It tagged that trend bar gap. Oh my goodness. Come on now. Get out of here. What are you doing? Yes, I do. I fat fingered some stuff here, man. So we've got this gap right up here. This would have been would that have been the breakaway gap? No, this would be the breakaway gap. Maybe in the measuring gap. This is the breakaway gap. It's the measuring gap. That's the exhaustion gap. The pullback. And now we're pushing back into here. I still feel bearish on Netflix. I mean, I know they're raising their prices. I know a lot of people who are canceling their Netflix. I am myself included, and family members of mine. They're just, the content's not there. There's no reason to. Even with their $5 billion WWE deal, I just don't see the value in having a Netflix account right now. I mean, it could just be me because I've got kids and the content on Netflix isn't necessarily something that I'm going to give my kids the remote to and let them go ham. But I don't know. I don't know about you. Does anybody else in here have Netflix? Do you still have Netflix? Is it something that maybe you've been looking at your costs as inflation continues up, things are getting more expensive? I mean, that's how I looked at it. Eggs are, going up. They're almost $3 a carton, and my family can go through a dozen in one sitting. So maybe I don't need Netflix, I don't know about y'all, but that's just my take on it. But at the same time, it's been making this nice move up week after week after week, big push up, big push up. Dolls on eggs, puts on Netflix, right? There's, the old saying, trade with the trend, don't trade against the trend. The trend is up right now on Netflix. Does it get to 700? It very well could be. Let's actually change this fib retrace. Let's change that to a 50%. And if we see price came down, came back up, tried to wick above that 50%, consolidated a little bit, tried again, came back down, reloaded, and then pushed above I would assume this is going to 700, honestly. It might chop along here a little bit, like below 650 into 630, but I would assume this is going back to 700 just based on this chart, honestly. Now Netflix doesn't quite have the pull that your Microsofts or your Apples do, but it does have some pull in it. So yeah, there's it's just chugging along. Trend is up. Not something I'd want to trade against right now. Boeing, Boeing has just been getting destroyed. We're getting basically what I feel is a dead cat bounce, but I think it wants 165. I think it wants this gap down here, the bottom of this broadening formation. I think it wants to keep going down. I would short every pump on this thing. Maybe look for an entry like right around this monthly gap that we broke to the downside of. But I'm I can't not be bearish on Boeing right now. At least down to this 165 area, if not lower. 150s, 130s could happen, but I'd be bearish on Boeing. Tesla haven't quite. We got the poke into that gap from 2 weeks ago. We're looking for it this week. We got an inside week this last week. Okay. I would love to see a little, just a little push down into like 160 before we take off. But this, I mean, it's at the bottom of this channel. Hold on, let me just clean some of this up so it's not so annoying to look at. It's at the bottom of this channel. We're finding some volume. Inside week last week. I would love to day trade the break above last week's high into the previous week's high, or the break below last week's low into the previous week's low. That would be a nice day trade, especially if it happens on a Thursday or a Friday when Tesla's premiums are a little bit cheaper. I mean, it's been beat up, and it's not quite the expensive trade that it was before, in my opinion. But that would be a nice trade from 165 to 160, 160. And that's a $5 trade in a day. That would be a nice return. So that's what I would look at on Tesla. But definitely this is a point where I feel like it would be a good spot for a bounce to the upside on a longer time frame, on a longer trade. I'll hit up Clean Spark here in a little bit. Coin, I'm still bearish coin. Like I want to be bearish coin. I don't like this company. I thought it would get to the break to the downside here and then continue down, but it got the break to the downside, filled this gap, and ripped to the upside. So, I mean, it's not following what I would expect it to do. It did get the long trade up here on the break out, and it filled as it took out these highs and pushed into that gap, but it didn't get the full breakout. It didn't continue, and now it's pulling back in. So this looks like a fake out. And I mean, I still have 2025 or 2026 puts on coin. I think it's gonna drop pretty hard. And one of the reasons I say this is if I take a look at the weekly right here, and I'll put it side by side with Bitcoin and its weekly chart. Okay, do we notice something here? Bitcoin's hitting newer highs. Coin is not. This is called a divergence. Okay. So coin is not anywhere near that high, but not only is it nowhere near that high, it's not hitting a new high at all. So Bitcoin is pushing up, coin is pushing down. Now, if we look at something like a MicroStrategy on the other hand is very much hitting the new high with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's new high, MicroStrategy's new high. Riot not doing it. Riot way down there. Down here chopping along. Accumulating. Mara also down here. way undervalued from that high. That tells me that investors don't think companies like Mara and Riot and Coinbase are in sync with Bitcoin anymore. So we saw the price action was very similar in the run up, but as Bitcoin hit that new high and these companies did not, that tells me that these are not the companies that I want to be trading if Bitcoin is going to be making a move. MicroStrategy is a company I want to be trading if Bitcoin's going to make a move. Unfortunately, MicroStrategy is 13. Sorry, my eyes are bad. $1,500 a share. Not necessarily the easiest on a port. So, and it's not something that I personally would want to be too heavy in as far as a long-term hold because it's tied to an imaginary currency. And yes, that is a personal opinion. I don't think Bitcoin is worth what it is worth right now, but the market dictates what the price will be. So keep that in mind. That is one reason that I do not like coin, and I think it will come back down. Roku has not been able to get things moving again. Got the breakdown all the way through, pushing down, still ranged. No reason for me to take a trade on Roku right now until it can make a push in or out of that range. And even to the downside, I wouldn't put it much below this weekly volume imbalance. I would expect a bounce there. So it's ranging. It got the big move down. No real trade on Roku right now, in my opinion. Disney, love it. I think it's just going to continue up. The chart, not necessarily the company. I'm just talking about the chart here. Got the breakout, the push up. I think it's going to continue up. I don't see why it doesn't try to take out the 126 area. It would make sense if it did. Okay, and that would be, I mean, that probably wouldn't be that bad of a low risk or a low IV trade. I mean, what's IV on Disney contracts right now? Does anybody know right offhand? I don't have a options table open. I'll give it a few seconds. But historically, Disney is a low IV stock, so you could probably grab some dated stuff out and ride the wave up to 126s. But that's up to you. This is also something that's at a premium. So it's not something that I would give it a short leash as far as the stop is concerned. But Disney, I feel, is going to continue up. Google. Google got the bounce up, the trigger to the upside, and the price target. Really looking forward to range here still. I think it just wants to pull back and probably move sideways here. So right now on Google, unless it's going to push above this previous high, let's see, we got that trade in there. We can get that out. Unless it's going to push above this previous high with some strength, I don't think it's going to do much of anything except just move sideways for right now. That was a big move. 22% IV on Disney contracts. That's hella low. I love that. I really like that for some longs. For right now, but I would feel like Google's just going to move sideways here. It'll probably come down, fill this gap, maybe push back up. I'd love to see it hold above this high right here. This order block probably. Here, we'll just mark it off as an order block. I'd love to see it hold that after it's gotten the break above and just chop sideways and consolidate for a little bit before it tries to make another break to the upside. So that's what I would like to see happen on Google, unless it makes a break above that 154 with some oomph. I want to see it push to 160 like in a week. Cisco, man. I mean, this chart is looking weak. Got the fake out to the upside and then the breakdown to the downside. And now it's just ranging, going sideways here. Got this nice trend line. I'd really look for a break to the downside of this trend line and I don't know why this line is here, but I'm going to move it. And I'd look for a move into the 45s out of a break on this trend. So I'd wait for it to break this trend and then move to the downside. Alternatively, looking at the weekly chart, it did create this trend bar gap to the downside, bounced up, hasn't quite hit it yet. It got close, but now we got an inside week. I'd like to see it maybe push up into here a little bit into 50, like 50 and a half one last time before giving up heading into this trend line. But feeling bearish on Cisco, but I would rather get to like 50 and a half before taking a short on it. What do you mean invalid username or password? It is not an invalid username or password. Think you're a swim? Try harder, please. Maybe my account moved over this weekend. We'll see. Goldman. There we go. Goldman getting the push up finally out of this broadening formation. Push up, close out. I think this is going to continue up to 426, which is going to give us some oomph in the banks. Morgan Stanley also getting the push up from over this previous trend line here. Hasn't quite broken out yet, but it's got Goldman to carry it. Bank of America also push out of the channel, getting the push up. I feel like banks want to make another push up here. And then what do we got for JPM? Maybe some choppy sideways action here above this exhaustion gap in a range before it moves out. Yeah. What can I say about JP Morgan Chase? That thing is just ripping. Let's check out the rest of banks. Bankery Dues, Burke B. Nothing much there. Deutsche is pushing. American Express pushing. Visa, big pullback, but it's still in an uptrend. I'd look for longs on Visa. It's a nice trend. I'd look for longs on Visa as it pushes into like 282. If that's something you want. Same with MasterCard. Now, all this, again, these premiums probably aren't the greatest to trade. Looking at Visa, even 12 days out, like 230 or 200 and 250 bucks at the money per contract. But XLF, on the other hand, is not. And XLF is one of my bread and butter traders. So it did get the push above that, hit a new all-time high, and then the pull back to fill this gap. I think it probably, maybe want to pull back a little bit here, but here's the gap that broke us out over this previous high right here. This is the trend bar gap that got the push out. Excuse me. I hope that didn't come through my microphone. If it did, I apologize. I'll get the planner in a minute here. But this would be a fantastic area for a long, in my opinion. And that's something that, I know some people like to take, in or at the money or in the money contracts to day trade. I think this would be a great swing, in my opinion. Great swing, maybe some 42 calls, ride it on up, see how far it wants to go, especially with the rest of the banks like Goldman, JP Morgan. They all feel like their weeklies all feel like they want more, in my opinion. So feeling a bit bullish on banks. And then Intel consolidating. This is a really wide stop, very poor trade for 1.23 risk reward. But it's there, I guess. We'll see how that pans out. But this is still, we got the push down, the rejection in this gap right here. And now we're just ranging. So the break below, call it 41 and a half. I want to see it move below 41 and a half with some oomph, maybe pushing to 40 on a weekly candle. So Probably not going to take another trade there until he breaks this range, as it's just sticking in there right now. All right. Clean Spark. I forgot what their ticker does. Nice push up, consolidating here on the weekly. It's just moving sideways. I bet if I put out this like on a 4 hour, yeah, it's just sideways action. I mean, it's just ranging. I went. This isn't something that I particularly would like a trade on yet. I'd like to see it break above these previous highs or lows before taking a trade on it. You can probably take a counter trade down to like 16 and a half, maybe even 16, but I would expect it to get down here and then bounce again. And until it's going to break out either way, there's not really a trade there that I would like to take on Clean Spark. Sprinkler. Yeah, I don't know what company this is, but they've got a 50, almost a 60% beat on earnings and a 3% beat on revenue, and they got that big of a drop. They must have had some absolutely horrible guidance. I mean, that's a 35% drop. Oops. Let's take a fib from that top to this bottom. And then I'm just going to use this. I mean, this is essentially a big bear flag, in my opinion. This is not something that I would necessarily want to trade long. But you could probably take a trade maybe with some time back up to the 15s. But like this is something that I would be looking for a break of this bear flag and a dump down to at least 11. That does not feel encouraging to me at all for a long. I'd wait for the break to the downside on whatever company this is based on the chart. Plantaire. Really, I was looking forward to pull into this gap, but this really does look like a head and shoulders is forming. It's essentially ranged here between 26 and 23, but this feels like a head and shoulders here. So I would look for a break of that neckline and a push down, but I would really like to see a push into 20. And then that's where I'd like to take along. I think we're going to get a big mental barrier there. And I think we might find some buyers here. If I push it out to the weekly, see if I can find like an order block or something over here, which is exactly what this would be. So there's an order block out there. There's a big gap right here, measuring gap. Looks like it might want a larger move to the upside here, but definitely something that I would maybe look for along around 20 versus getting in now, unless I'm in shares, in which case I just add more at 20. But I think I got rid of. I had some shares on this, and then I got out in February when it made that big push. I think it was around 23, 24, somewhere in there is where I ended up getting out. But it made that nice big push up, but definitely feels like a head and shoulders here. Might want to break to the downside. So feeling a bit bearish on Planetaire, but definitely something I would wait for it to break this neckline before anything, before taking a trade on it. At least on this setup. And win. Just some chilling action there. Nothing really to report there on win. You're welcome. And yeah, you can have multiple trend lines. I think it's important to have multiple trend lines. Yeah, I mean, I'm not. He's getting this pullback here. Let's see, we got that move. Get this move here. So if we do like our Al Brooks weekly gap thing, Whoa, what happened to my thing? So there's like a breakaway gap over the short term high. Didn't get another gap until here. So it'd be the measuring gap. We're holding that, which is a good sign. And then we take let's take a line here up to the middle of that measuring gap, and then duplicate it. And then this would be the price target we'd be looking for, but it has these longer term trends here. So honestly, I feel like this might be worth a long, and it's at a really nice position here. Take up to 119, and I could adjust my stop wherever I want to. This would be more of a swing. This would be exactly a swing. This is a weekly chart. This isn't something that I'd be looking for a day trade on. I don't think it's going to run 20% in a single day. But this would be a nice place for a long, in my opinion, on win. As a matter of fact. What are we looking like on that? Let's see, weekly chart. So, probably at least 60 days. Let's look at July 120s. What are those running? 157, not too bad. There is no liquidity in these contracts, though. There's no open interest. There's very little volume. June 120s maybe might be a better bet. What about October? Nope, nothing in October. November. And there's some action on the November 115s, but not enough for me to put $500 a contract into. And there's not a whole lot on oh my goodness. Why can't I click tonight? January's. What do we got for January's? Yeah, there's not even a lot of open interest on the January's. So given the fact that there's not a ton in here, and I'd be looking at probably June's, I'd actually take something a bit closer, probably a 110 or a 115. 110 has the higher open interest, and I would short that target and see if I can't get a move up, just because there's not more days. You know what I'm saying? But totally off topic. Would I recommend any books on technical analysis? I would recommend books on price action, and instead of technical analysis. Technical analysis, I mean, you can watch a YouTube video and figure out technical analysis. It's not that hard. Uh, but I think L. Brooks is probably going to be your best bet on how to read price action. And he's got reading price charts bar by bar. That's a good one. How to trade price action, trading price action and trading ranges, trading price action reversals, and trading price action trends. Those would be my go-to books. And I'll say them again. Trading Price Action. It's a series. It's like a 3-part series. Trading Price Action by Al Brooks. And he's got 3 books: Trading Ranges, Reversals, and Trends. And those are some pretty good books. And then Reading Price Charts bar by bar, technical analysis for price action for the serious trader. Al Brooks is some good stuff. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got a whole video series too, but it's like $500 or something like that. Not something that I would expect a whole lot of people would have the money to put into it. But he does have a YouTube channel, and he puts content out there for free, and he talks through his trades. He's incredibly dry. He is not entertaining in the least, but very informative, and very, very helpful. This three gap system that I use, the breakaway, the measuring, and then the target, that's from Al Brooks. So I definitely respect the guy, and those would be my suggestions as far as technical analysis or price action books. But Disney, please. Disney, I'm bullish. We hit Disney a little bit earlier. It's got the breakout. I think it wants 126. And this is a weekly chart, so that would be at least ideally 60 days, because once you get to good night always sometimes once you get below 30 days to expiration, theta starts to pick up. It starts to give more as you get closer to the expiration date. So for swings, I really like more than 30 days, somewhere around 50 to 60 days if possible, if not more, on the swing chart for Disney for a weekly chart. So looking at like the 126s would be my final target. Look at May's 125s would probably be my best bet. There was a lot of open, there's 14,000 open interest, which means there's some liquidity there and I can get in and out. And the IV is at 29.5%. So it's not something crazy. And if Disney starts to move and that IV starts to jack up, that means premium is going to go up. And if I'm long, that's going to help me out. You are welcome, the CEO. Anybody have any other tickers to check out? Somebody asked me in DM, what is Al Brooks's YouTube channel? Let's go take a look here. I'll pull it up and I'll put the link in the description. It's not called Al Brooks, unfortunately. It's at least I'm pretty sure it's not. It's called something else. At least I thought I was subscribed to it. Am I not subscribed to it? What's going on here? I did speak on Amazon, but I can run through it again. Amazon's got the breakout of this. Excuse me. Had this broadening formation, got the breakout, the pullback, and now we're getting a push above. Very similar situation to Microsoft, where we put in a range, got the wick above, and then the push up. Looking for a similar move here on Amazon this week. So we got the range, the wick above. I'd like to see the big push up, and I would like to see it push into like 184, 188. Want to see a big move. The 125s for Disney. Uh, let's see. You're looking at April 19th. I mean, that's only 26 days. Your theta is going to start picking up on that. That would maybe be. I mean, no. I mean, I personally wouldn't. I personally wouldn't get something. I wouldn't swing something with less than 30 days to expiration. But that's my opinion. Yeah. Have a good night, Steven. Costco. Woof ta. Got the breakaway gap. Is that on the monthly? Sure is. Breakaway gap right here. Measuring gap. We took it from this last swing low on the breakout of the triangle. Projected it out to 766. Got that. And now it's pulling back. So the trade was good. We got that. What does it look like now? Well, I really would have appreciated if it pushed over that price target and consolidated up here, but instead it pushed over and then it pulled back. This is a monthly move. So let's see if we can find that exhaustion gap. So we got the breakout, the measuring, and then we got a bit of an exhaustion gap here. This would be your first exhaustion gap based on Brooks. So I would like to see it chop around here. I would like, now that it pulled back here, I would like to see it range and just chop around for the next month or so. Take a look at the daily, what that might look like here. That's what it would look like. I'd like to see it put in a range between 767 and roughly 700 and just chop back and forth. Right now it's in the middle of the range that I'd like to see, so it's not something that I'd want to take a trade on. I would look for it to range because it got the break above that and then it pulled back. Actually, I might be looking at shorts to 700, but again, right now, it's not something I'd want to take a trade on. I'd want more of a formation to happen before taking a trade on it. Snow. Interesting bounce point right there, right? And we finally got some strength here. Interesting where that happened. Interesting. Very interesting. So here's something interesting on snow that I really see on this price action on the weekly. You got this big push down. We're not taking out the previous high. We're just pushed down below the low. Then take out the previous high, push down below the low. Now we're getting a smaller body. And then boom, last week we took out not only the low, but the highs of the previous candle. And now we got a nice small body candle here. And it's in a spot where we would have been looking for a bounce. And that's what it got. So on a shorter time frame, good bounce point here on snow. Look at this monthly though. This monthly though, we got this gap right here. Okay. Now we've inverted it. So you don't always get the bounce in the gap. Okay. You don't always get the bounce in the gap. But when it paints through that gap, that's very bearish in my opinion. So although we got the bounce here on the daily at this gap back here, looking at the larger time frame, we got the breakaway here and then the push right back through it. So I think we're going to see the larger time frame take precedence here. Take a look at the weekly. With the pullback into that gap, maybe a push up to 173, but based on this monthly chart, this feels very much like it wants to target these lows. Around 138 or so. Is that where that was? 137, 138. So we're thinking about two different gaps. So when you're thinking of a gap, you're thinking of, let's switch out to the daily. You're thinking of this gap right here. It's a big old gap, right? No price action trading anywhere in that. The gap I'm talking about is called a trend bar gap. And we'll see that here. And what I'm looking for, I'll try to zoom in as much as possible, is the high of this candle right here for October and the low of this candle right here for December creates a gap in price action where price moved quick enough that it hasn't been filled yet. This is what Al Brooks would refer to as a trend bar gap, what YouTuber ICT refers to as a fair value gap. And it's where price moves over the course. It's basically a 3-candle setup. Okay. It's where price is moving and creates a gap between the previous wick's high and the consequent or the following wick's low. It's a really good place to look for. It's considered a market imbalance where prices move so fast that the market is now imbalanced in that area. So we're looking at some kind of action in that area. And right now, what we saw here on the monthly chart so far, we're not done with March, but we're getting there. As we saw this gap between October and January, and then it came right back down, bounced. Look at that. Bounce, bounce, bounce. 3 bounces right at that price. And then ripped right through it. Normally, I'd look for like a long somewhere around the 50% mark, but this ripped right through. So now this gap is now inverted. So I would be looking for something like a bounce down and then a bounce back up and then a continuation to the downside. So that's the gap that I'm talking about. Trend bar gap if you're following Brooks, fair value gap if you're following ICT. But snow feeling very bearish right here, in my opinion. I don't really like. I would look for a bounce around 170 and then just short it down to 140. But I'm guessing IB is not the greatest on these contracts either. I mean, this is 48, 49. I mean, these are $1,500 at the money contracts. So that's not really something that I would bother trading right now. QCOM. Quality qual, pushing up, getting that nice move. I like it. I think this is another company that's one of those sleepers where we're going to start getting domestic semiconductor production online. And I think this is going to be one of those companies that helps us reach that goal. So it already hit the price target. We don't always get a retrace, but when we do, it makes for a really nice trade. We already got the price target on the 3 gap. Took out this high too. Excuse me, man. On the monthly. Let's check out the weekly. Yeah, I mean, right now it's just kind of sitting right above this price target, 162. Probably just going to bounce back and forth for right now. But this is something that I wouldn't mind taking shares on and just seeing how high it can go if it decides to go. But long term here, just like this monthly chart, we already hit this price target, but we'll see how far it wants to go. Here's a nice volume imbalance that it rejected off of. Volume imbalance being the difference here between the body's candles. So the close of this candle and the opening of this candle. Price wicked in there, but it didn't do any closes. It just wicked in there and then went back down. So it's considered what is considered a volume imbalance. I don't know where they make up the names or where they get the names. I just know where they get them or where they what they're called, you know. But that would be the volume imbalance here, and that's where we're currently we pushed up above and now we're rejecting. So if I take right up was a 618. So I'd be looking for a move back down to 163 in the short term on Qualcomm. I wouldn't mind taking a trade down to there. And I'll see if it wants to continue down. But for right now, the short term trade I think would be a move down to 163.66. Whew. Let's see what else has been moving. Banks, cybersecurity stocks, ANET, nice pushing up. PanW still got that big move to the downside and has just been consolidating down here. Hasn't really done anything yet. It's got a nice range here. I'd look for maybe a move over let's call it 294. If it can push above 294 with some movement, for some longs on PanW. CrowdStrike still also similar, just moving sideways. FTNT didn't get the long, stopped me out on that. Datadog at the premium level or the discount level of a move, I wouldn't mind taking that for a possible swing up to 134. But the problem with Datadog is that there's not a whole lot of liquidity in the options chain. So even if I'm looking at May, which is only 54 days out, there's only 1,000 OI sitting at relatively close to the money. So it poses a possible liquidity issue. Shares would be a better trade as it seems to bounce up here and is changing direction. OKTA got that nice big gap up, also just consolidating up here. Nothing really to report in the world of cybersecurity. It looks like it's all just moving out sideways after the big moves, which is how you want to get yay or nay. Lilly also moving sideways here, even after that big down move in the middle of a day, but very much feels like it's bear flagging right here. It's right around that 168. Can't really get the close above it. I wouldn't mind for a move down to 728, but those are some pricey contracts. mRNA, I think is going to go sub 100 and stay down there. We'll see what happens. But even Pfizer, which is a massive company, which is finding bouncing points in this gap right here, which is where we keep bouncing. We look back. Is that a weekly gap? That's a monthly gap. Is it any sort of gap? Nope, just consolidation area. So bouncing in that area. Nice place for a long, in my opinion. I wouldn't mind taking a long on Pfizer. Let's see, where would we look for possible move to the other? This is a weekly chart or a monthly chart. Let's take a look at the weekly. Heck yeah. Maybe 36 or so. Wouldn't be that bad, especially with just put my stop right below these previous swing lows right here. Be a nice one. What are PFE contracts running? PFE 54 days out, looking for a move above 35. There's some cheap contracts. So cheap that I almost wouldn't want to buy them because they're only a penny. What stocks are at the top of my watch list right now? Semiconductors, semiconductors. ARM. Is ARM not on this list? ARM is on this list. ARM is definitely something that should be watching right now. It's close to a breakout. They make a ridiculous amount of money. And I think they're just one more step in the eventual invasion of Taiwan from China. VRT, also something to look at. Nice range up here. I'll change this into a 60-minute. But got the breakout. Bouncing here. I saw some options activity here, which was somebody had 80 calls that they rolled out on Friday. And they rolled them out to 84 calls, I think it was. So they're expecting to move up. There was a sizable amount as well. So at the bottom of this range, it would make sense that it would try to make a push up to the top of this range as well. Wouldn't mind it just seeing move sideways and then get a break over 85. But VRT, also one to watch. MU, big flag, big earnings, big news. Keep that on your watch list. Contracts are probably a bit pricey for MU standards right now. IV is a bit high than it usually is for that stock. So just keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on NVIDIA too, because whatever NVIDIA is going to do, the rest of these companies are going to do. SMCI, I'm actually in shorts, like leap shorts, like ridiculous into the ground shorts. But we'll see if that happens. They got added to the S&P 500. So, who knows what could happen with that. But it's at the bottom of this area. Looks like it might want to make a break to the upside. Nice little flag here over Thursday and Friday. Definitely something to keep an eye on as well. And TSM is going to be tricky right now because I think part of what's going on there is going to whatever is going to be happening in Japan, or not Japan, China with Taiwan is going to affect Taiwan Semiconductors, especially if I know they have plants here in the U.S., which could pose an issue if they are taken over by China, and China then gets to dictate what happens with those plants, or maybe they just sell. I wouldn't mind see if they can sell the company to a U.S. investor before China comes in and tries to take over Taiwan. I think that might be a smart move. So if Taiwan Semiconductor can sell to someone like NVIDIA, I think NVIDIA could buy them. Not exactly sure what Taiwan's market cap is, but they are the largest producer of semiconductors. And that's about it. Semiconductors at the top of the list. ARM, number one on that list. And then, maybe along there on Pfizer. Not much to report in cybersecurity. And then XLF in the banks. I think those are my top stocks. ARM, XLF, whatever else I said. Pfizer. Any other questions? Give it 7 seconds. If I get nothing, we're going to call it. Well, here's the thing about ARM. They have that lockout period ending. Okay. So investors, there's a lockout period for investors. They do have the ability to sell their shares. It's going to be depending on whether or not they want to sell those shares. I really only preferred this is a nice triangle. It's a nice setup. I don't like to attach a bias to it. I would really prefer to go into this without a bias and wait for it to break out and then decide if I'm going to go long or short. But based on what I've seen in their earnings report, they make like 96% margins right now. Like that is ridiculous. For every dollar they generate, they get to keep 96% of it. Think about that. Think about how much money you'd have if you got to keep 96% of every dollar you made at your job, if you have one. So they make a lot of money, and they also, I think, they supply CPUs for Hawaii Chinese phone manufacturer, and a few other things too. So Something to keep on there. Wait for a break. I mean, it looks like it's breaking out right now. Really nice move over the last Thursday and Friday there. Just consolidating here. This another triangle inside of a triangle. We can do triangleception, but I would be looking at possibly a big move on ARM. The problem is, I think IV is ramping up on those contracts. Yeah, they're at 74%. And that's only 54 days out. So even 150 calls are $1,100 a contract. And that's not even a new high. That's this right here. So maybe if it's within the budget of your portfolio, maybe look at grabbing some shares, maybe one, two, see if you can get a nice move up to the upside there. Now you can always hold on to the share forever, or you can buy more if it dumps. But they do make a ridiculous amount of money, so something to keep an eye on. Anything else? You're welcome, Jose. Thanks for coming out, everybody. I think my kids are asleep. We had some issues with nighttime. But nobody's come downstairs to my office, which means everybody's either asleep or being held down. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. And I hope you have a good week. If you have any questions, tag us in the Discord. We have everybody there to help. So if you ever have any questions, just feel free to ask. If other members are being condescending pricks, then just tell them to shut up and ask your question anyway. Because our team is here to help. And our goal is to try and trade or try and help people become traders and investors and not just Lambo chasing YouTubers. So thank you for coming out. I appreciate your time. Thank you for yours. And we will see you in the Discord.